Hello and welcome to our session on Maharishi Ayurveda tips, health tips for busy people. And this topic is about seasons and seasonal diets. In Ayurveda, we understand that everything is governed by the three doshas, the laws of nature. And each season has its own predominant dosha, which needs to be balanced during that season. Very important. We adjust our diet and routine to each season. So here are the quotes from the Ayurvedic literature from Sushruta Samhita Chikitsa Stan. A wise man should take food of such tastes in any particular season of the year as is antidotal to the bodily dosha which is naturally aggravated during that season. So we take foods that pacify or balance that dosha, predominant dosha of the season. And from Charaka Samhita, one's diet of various types leads to promotion of strength and complexion only if he knows the wholesomeness according to different seasons. So the diet must be adjusted. And so some particulars how we do that. The 7 days at the end and the commencement of seasons is known as interseasonal period or Ritu Sandhi. Sandhi means gap or juncture. And so the end of one season, the beginning of another season, that's the time, those 2 weeks, the time to make the transition to the new diet and routine. During that period, the regime of the preceding season should be discontinued gradually, and sudden discontinuous or sudden adaptation gives rise to diseases caused by non-habituation or asatmya, or unsuitable. So any sudden change can be a shock to the physiology. Physiology can't adapt, and it can give rise to imbalance itself. So, but the 2 weeks is usually enough. The last week of the previous season, going into the first week of the new season, that 2 weeks is the time to make the transition. And these are signs and symptoms of the doshas that need attention. If we have some of these symptoms, then it is important to do some purification therapies. Good to see an Ayurveda practitioner and do some cleansing or various rejuvenation therapies available in Ayurveda. Herbs and diet and various purification therapies. There's heat treatments, there's massages, there's cleansing procedures in Ayurveda that are extremely effective. So if we're suffering from indigestion, not just one day, but sometimes, anorexia, no taste for food, no desire for food, obesity, anemia, fluid buildup or paleness of the complexion, heaviness or exhaustion, acne, hives or itching, no inclination for work, restlessness or laziness, or if there's strain or fatigue, or weakness in mind and body, or a bad smell from the body, or lassitude, dullness, no inclination for activity, sleeplessness or insomnia, excessive sleep, drowsiness during the day, impotence, impaired intellect, inauspicious dreams, loss of strength and complexion despite intake of nourishing diet. So in case of manifestation of the above signs and symptoms, the patient should be administered elimination therapy with due regard to the vitiated doshas and the strength of the patient, from Charaka Samhita Sutrasthana. Again, these rejuvenation therapies are available in Ayurveda clinics in many cities around the world. Lots in India, and especially South India. And in Fairfield, Iowa, we have the Raj, which is a premier Maharishi Ayurveda facility where one can do these purification therapies in residence and come for a week or two and really get the physiology balanced. So now, diet according to the season. So what do we change during the season? Well, main thing is going to be diet. So in the spring, now this is in temperate climates, in the spring, there's some heat after a longer cold period. But that predominant dosha, because it's still wet and moist, but the heaviness that's been accumulating in the cold season is kapha. And the sweet, cool, moist qualities of spring is also kapha. So spring season is a time when kapha is accumulated and aggravated, And so the best diet in the spring is Kapha Pasvang diet. And we've seen in other lessons that the Kapha diet is lighter food, drier food, warm food, less quantity, less heavy foods, less pasta and pastries and heavy things and heavy meats, and favoring pungent, bitter, and astringent tastes. That's all the light tastes with air in them. So spicy, bitter and astringent. Bitter is greens, and astringent is maybe dals and pulses. Those should be favored in Kapha Pasvang diet. And food should be warm and well cooked, but lighter. So fewer oils, fewer sweeteners, fewer nuts, fewer heavy foods, and more light foods, like well-cooked vegetables and soups. So in previous lessons, you'll get details for the Kapha Pasvang diet. Now summer. Obviously the heat of summer will increase pitta, and it accumulates all during the summer and aggravates actually at the end of the summer and early autumn when the leaves turn red on the trees in many parts. So that's the time for Pitta Pasvang diet. And Pitta we know is fire and water, so we reduce heat, reduce hot spices, reduce fermented things, pickle, ketchup, tomatoes, cheese, hard cheese, soy sauce, vinegar, alcohol. Those things all really increase pitta a lot, and the hot spices. So those are to be reduced in the summer season and early fall. And later fall and winter, when it's cold after a hot period or cool, and there's a change of season, sometimes there's more moisture, and in the winter there's less moisture, it's drier. But the cold and windy qualities, and if there's dryness, increases vata. That's a vata quality. So people tend to get dry skin, they can get a little restless, and things can dry out a little bit. So Vata Pasvang diet in the late fall and the winter when it's cold and windy. So Vata diet we know is warm, unctuous foods, sweet, sour, and salty tastes, all which are the heavier tastes, have earth and water in them. And very important, food should be warm, well cooked, and more substantial, but according to digestive power always. We always eat according to our appetite and our digestive power. So this is the simplest version of the diet according to the season. Now here's a seasonal routine for prevention. This is the 6 seasons in India and in the tropics. So it's a little more detailed, but if we live in the tropics or we're spending time in India or Thailand or Nepal or those parts of Asia or the tropics around the equator, you'll have these 6 seasons. So there's early winter called Hemant, late winter called Shishir, spring is Vasant, summer is Grishma, the rainy season, I can't quite read that, and autumn is Sharad. So this is good to follow if you're in these in these areas. So early winter is cold weather, and so there's medium to maximum strength. Interestingly, when it's cold outside, cooler outside, the internal fire gets stronger because you need the internal heat. So actually digestion becomes stronger, and so your overall strength becomes stronger, digestive fire. So the effect of the season of the body, Agni is strengthened. And so that there can be the strength of the dhatus, but it could aggravate vata. Vata could get aggravated. So in the early winter, then Vata Pasvang food and regimen. So Vata Pasvang regimen means good routine, regular routine, eating on time, sleeping in time, because Vata is irregular. Now late winter, again, more rough and cold weather, and so there's maximum to medium strength, again, because that fire inside is increased. So Vata is aggravated, so Vata Pasvang diet and routine then. Spring Vasant, spring rays of the sun, warm weather, so after the cold season. So then there's medium strength in the spring. And kapha has been accumulating during the cooler winter season. So kapha is actually aggravated in the spring also. And so aggravated kapha liquefies by the warm rays of the sun, can disturb and block the physiology. So many people have spring respiratory allergies, like May, hay fever, like that. So that means the kapha is aggravated, and so we have to eliminate kapha, purify kapha pacifying diet, food and regimen. And then that's more exercise, and lighter, drier foods, and more spices, like that, and avoiding heavy foods. And summer, strong, dry heat, medium to minimum strength, because the heat outside, so the internal heat decreases, so Agni becomes weaker, so the body becomes weaker. And so in case of dryness, so it disturbs weakness, increases weakness of digestion, and the body in general. So then summer needs pitta pacifying food and regimen, and avoid too much physical exercise, and also reproductive activity at that time, because the body is a little weaker. Now in the rainy season, it's cold, humid, and changing after dry weather. So that's minimum to medium strength, vata accumulation during the summer. Now summer increases pitta because of the heat, but if there's dryness, then that also increases vata at the same time. So what we have to do then in the rainy season, we have to eliminate any excess pitta and vata. So balancing vata in particular, but also any pitta. But if it's windy and rainy, and that change season, that changing then so mainly vata we have to pacify in the rainy season. And autumn, it's more hot and sunny weather after the rainy and cold season. So that's medium strength pitta accumulation during the previous season, during summer and somewhat the rainy season. So there's aggravation of pitta due to the sudden heat after the rainy season. It can get hot in the tropics. So elimination of pitta shodhana, and pitta pacifying diet routine. So autumn is a very good time for purification, these seasonal purification therapies of panchakarma, and spring is the other best time. Okay, so that's the 6 season variety of the doshas. Similar, but a few variances there. So now, vata, pitta, and kapha increase during specific seasons due to the principle of similarity. So vata accumulates when the weather is cold, dry, and windy, because vata is like the wind. It's cold and dry and moving. Pitta accumulates when the weather is hot, of course, and kapha accumulates when the weather is cold and wet, like the spring season. So in Western Europe and North America, vata, pitta, and kapha generally increase during the following. So vata in late autumn and winter, mid-October to mid-March. So that's the vata time. So it's going October until springtime. So the winter time mainly, late autumn. Pitta in the summer and the early autumn, mid-June to mid-October. Pitta is accumulating and aggravating. And kapha is in the spring, mid-March to mid-June. So in Europe and North America, these are the main seasons here. Oh, it's a little simpler. But now there are geographical variations in Europe. And if you see in the chart here, look at the British Isles here in the blue on the left. So it's oceanic area. There are lots of moisture, lots of fog. The weather is fairly stable because of the currents, ocean currents and so forth. But look at this. You see there's a couple months of pitta and a few, maybe 3 months of vata, a little more vata. But most of the year is more kapha, interestingly. So kapha predominant in the British Isles and the coastal regions of Western Europe. There's a lot of kapha there because of that moisture, that cool, moist valley from the ocean and all the fog and everything. Interesting. Now, if you go into North Central Europe and the yellow bands here, and even up into Scandinavia, then you have still a lot of kapha, but there's a little more pitta and a good bit more vata, like 4 or 5 months of vata here. Because there's more winds and less influence from the sea. So less kapha, more vata. Now, if you look at the Alps, the high altitudes, this band of the Alps in Europe there, in Italy and France and some of these areas in Germany, in the high altitudes, what do you have? You have thinner air, you have higher winds, it gets dry, and the weather is very changing. In the mountains, the weather can be very changing quickly. So all those are vata qualities. So look at this. In the mountain regions, most of the months of the year are vata. And you have a little bit of kapha and a little bit of pitta. So vata pacification needs to be an ongoing thing in the mountainous regions, interestingly. And then you have of northern Asia, far North Europe and northern Asia, this big area, subcontinental area. Then you have, again, maybe 7 months of vata, because it'll be cold and windy, and then a couple months of kapha, and maybe a few more months of pitta. There can be some heat there, also accumulating in those northern latitudes. And then you go down to Mediterranean here. Look at this green area. Spain, Italy, and all these Mediterranean countries, northern Africa, along the coast of the Mediterranean. Look what we have here. We have almost equal vata, a little bit more vata, but quite a bit more pitta, and a bit more kapha, so more balanced over the year. Still a few more months of vata, but several more months of pitta than any of the others. So it can get warm in that region. There is some oceanic influence too, so there's a bit more kapha. And now if you go to the desert areas, we're going down into southern Europe and northern Africa, then you have significantly more pitta, 5 months of pitta, a month or two of kapha, and there's 4 or 5 months of vata there. Because the desert gets very hot, but then it quickly changes and gets very cold, and it's dry. So it's a back and forth between pitta and vata. So that's some geographic variations of the seasons in Europe. Now let's go to North America. And you see some different and some similar patterns. What you see in the coastal regions up here in British Columbia, on this blue area, on the west coast of North America, in Canada and the Pacific Northwest, you see again that oceanic influence, so quite a bit of kapha, 5 months of kapha, a few months of pitta, a few months of vata. So more kapha to the oceanic influence. But then you go to the Rocky Mountain, the mountainous regions, and again, you got, 7 or 8 months of vata. A lot of vata in the high plane, on the high areas, and then a little bit of pitta, and then some kapha. Interesting. Now in the western United States, all this yellow area, then you have, maybe 6 months of vata, 3-4 months of pitta, and the rest kapha. So it's drier, colder, windier in this whole region. So there's more vata there. Now if you go to California, you have almost balanced, a little more, 1 more month of vata, but all 3 doshas are kind of balanced during the year. Southern California, of course, is a very popular place to live. And then you go to the mountainous regions again, but in the south, you have, again, quite a bit more vata, where you can have high winds and dryness. Okay. You go way down here, around Panama, this area, in southern Mexico, this little green area in the bottom. So you have 6 months of pitta, very pitta down there. And then the rest of the year is split between Vata and Kapha. So a lot of heat, moist heat, so hot and humid. So very Pitta in the southern regions. Now the central United States and the temperate parts of the United States, more balanced. Eastern United States, the green area, we have a bit more Pitta than Vata and Kapha, but it's, closer to balance. And then you have right in the center of the U.S., and it's almost balanced, Vata, Pitta, Kapha right here. And then the southern tip of Florida, southern Florida, you get again, half the year is Pitta, and the other half is divided between Vata and Kapha. Pitta because, again, the heat and the moisture, because Pitta is fire and water. So there's some seasonal variations here that we see. So we kind of go by the weather, the temperature, the humidity, and the winds. Those are the main factors that determine the predominant dosha in a season, in a place. All right, so that gives us some ideas about the seasonal variations. So now, how do we deal with this? Our health tip. So we know what season it is for us, and now we have a little bit, you can look it up in these charts. But if it's cold and windy and dry, you know it's Vata season, if it's like that for some weeks. So that means we want to mainly look after Vata. Okay? And you all know the Vata diet, sweet, sour, and salty tastes, and enough oil, sweeteners, and warm, unctuous food, and a stable routine. And now we check our dosha diet that's best for our pulse, if we've learned the pulse. And so if it's Vata season and we have Vata predominant pulse, then it's real clear. We have to pacify Vata. But what if it's Vata season and we have Pitta strongest in the pulse? Either our pulse or we have a consultation by an Ayurveda practitioner who can tell us which dosha we need to balance. So then we would need to balance Vata and Pitta. And so Vata needs sweet, sour, and salty tastes. Pitta needs sweet, bitter, and astringent tastes. So we have a mix of all 6 tastes, but favoring the sweet to pacify Vata and Pitta. And again, not necessarily sugar, but cooked vegetables are sweet, cooked dals are sweet, grains are primarily sweet. So those kinds of things, nourishing food that promotes some bulk and pacify Vata and Pitta. And then we balance all the other factors. So balancing Vata and Pitta, and there are lots of things. Aloe vera balances Vata and Pitta. There are a number of herbs and spices and foods. So we cross-reference our Vata and Pitta lists, and we can do a mix. Now, if it's Vata season and we're Kapha predominant, or we're heavy, dull, blocked, Ama pulse, then we have to have lighter foods and more heating foods and so forth. But we want to keep an eye on the other dosha. So pacifying mainly, because we go mainly by our pulse and our physiology, what we need to balance. But pacifying Kapha during Vata season actually can be a little bit easier because the season is helping us balance the Kapha. But we have to keep an eye on Kapha too. So we don't go too far in balancing Kapha. Not a lot of dry foods. Not too much light food. We moderate it a little bit for the season. And we stay warm because Vata and Kapha are both cold. So very important. So having warm food, staying warm, staying out of the wind, like that. And of course, good routine. But for Kapha, we need a little more exercise than for Vata, but not too much. Like it. So we just balance it. We balance it. So then note the foods that are for the season and the foods that are for your dosha, and we see if there's any overlap, any match, and then introduce those foods, especially favor those foods that are good for both doshas, and there will be some. And then try a little adjustment to your diet and note each day and each week in your journal any experiences, any improvement in digestion, any reduction in symptoms, making you feel better, more energy, more liveliness, more clear channels, or whatever it might be. All right. So good luck with balancing yourself due to the seasons. And as always, it's good to have an Ayurveda consultation with an Ayurvedic practitioner if you haven't learned the pulse especially, so they can guide you to what doshas really need to be balanced. All right. Until next time, take good care of yourself.